What is awakening? What do we mean when we use the concept awakening? Well, it is useful to describe what it is that we are awakening out of, so to say. Identification with thinking. We are simply awakening out of the idea that thinking can, in any way, be who I am. Thinking is an internal dialogue. Thinking is an internal narrative. It's a storytelling machine. The story about me. But that story about me is not I. Not many human beings are aware of that. It is a part of the conditioning of the human mind that we end up identifying with thinking. Identifying with thinking is also what we call the human ego. And if we investigate into it, it is very obvious that, of course, I cannot be my thinking. But not many human beings are interested in that discovery. Or perhaps I should rephrase that and say that the process of identifying with thinking is not interested in knowing that it is an illusion. It's a self-image. It's a fiction. It's a fata morgana. It's simply just a story in the mind. A story about who I am. But that is most certainly not who I am, and that is most certainly not who you are. Thinking is self-talk. And when there are identification with thinking, then this self-talk is more or less perpetual. It almost seems to have a life on its own. And then the human being becomes absorbed into that narrative, that story, the story about me. A thought cannot think. A thought cannot think. So who is thinking? Or perhaps I should say, what is thinking? What I am sharing here is the essence of awakening. You could build a lot of interesting stories about that, but that will never ever be awakening. Awakening is the sudden dawning. Of course, I am not my thinking. I, whatever I is, exists independent of any description, of any story, of any narrative, of any thinking. A thought cannot think. Who is thinking? I am thinking. But what is that I that is capable of thinking? Well, that's the same I that is capable of sitting here and speaking. That's the same I that is sitting there, listening. And if we were to investigate into that I, that is a very revealing investigation if it is done honestly. If we are to investigate into that I, we would pretty quickly discover that that I is silence. But that it also is a vibrant and very aware silence. A vibrant, intelligent, aware silence. But please do not adopt that as a new belief. The I is silence, and that is why I am again and again emphasizing the importance of falling in love with stillness. Because what essential happens is that you will be falling in love with yourself, with your true self. And mind you, I'm not arguing for stopping to think. I'm not saying that we should stop thinking. Absolutely not. Thinking, concepts, the ability to speak, language, It's an amazing tool, but they cannot define who we are. Or should I rephrase that? When we discover that we are not our thinking, the identification with thinking dissolves. That is the awakening, and that makes something else possible. That awakening tends to fuel a curiosity about one's own true nature. And then we start investigating into our own true nature. And that investigation, it starts always by settling into silence. Being curious about the context. Shifting attention away from the content and towards the context. Realizing that no content can ever define who I am. They will at best be descriptions. But don't make the descriptions into beliefs. When we discover that thinking cannot define who we are in essence, then we learn to handle concepts, to handle the internal storytelling. Then we learn to handle that with care. We learn that we can paint poetic pictures, but that these poetic pictures never ever will become reality. So who are you? After awakening, we understand that that question cannot be answered. As I said, we might be poetic about it. But we know that no matter what we describe, no matter what we say, that's not it. And it will never ever be it. So why argue about it? Sometimes it happens that the mind gets interested in trying to find out whether other people are awake or not. But that is irrelevant. Are you awake? Do you know that thinking cannot contain who you are? So identification with thinking, that is the essence. That is what we need to see clearly for an awakening to occur, to happen, to unfold. And in a sense, it doesn't matter what else we are talking about. In some sense, it will always just end up being a waste of time. If there is still identification with thinking, then that identification with thinking will always only be on the lookout for something that can enhance the story, something that can make the story about me more interesting, more fulfilling. Because that is the dilemma. This story, this internal narrative, identification with thinking, that story is unfulfilling. And it always will be, because it is a story. So that is the essence, and I will be focusing on this essence about awakening, about realizing that thinking cannot contain who I am. And that is the awakening. That realization is the awakening, and that awakening makes something else possible. So I will be focusing on this aspect, identification with thinking. And I will be addressing that aspect so that we can cut through the illusion, cut through the belief that thinking in any way are able to define who I am and who you are. I will be back. Thank you for listening, my friend. Take care.